Welcome to Outside View Scandals. Today we're diving into one of England's most enduring mysteries and scandals, the accusations against Richard III. This is a story full of intrigue, ambition, and of course, plenty of Tudor propaganda. Richard III, the last Plantagenet king, has been accused of one of the darkest crimes in English history, the murder of his young nephews known as the Princes in the Tower. But was Richard truly the ruthless villain, desperate enough to kill his own family for the throne? Or has history been a little too eager to paint him with a villain's brush? To set the scene, let's go back to the year 1483. King Edward IV dies suddenly, leaving the throne to his young son Edward V, who is only 12 years old. As you might imagine, 12-year-old kings don't have much experience with power, which is where Uncle Richard enters the picture. Richard, Duke of Gloucester and loyal brother to the late king, is appointed as Lord Protector to his young nephew Edward V. It's his duty to guide and protect the boy until he is old enough to rule on his own. Sounds, straightforward, right? Well, not quite. Edward and his younger brother, Richard, the Duke of York, are taken to the Tower of London, ostensibly for their safety and to prepare for Edward's upcoming coronation. But somewhere between May and June of that year, Richard's role as protector takes an unexpected turn. In a matter of weeks, he goes from Uncle Protector to King Richard III. How, you might ask? It starts with a sudden discovery of evidence that Edward IV's marriage was invalid due to a pre-contract. This revelation conveniently renders young Edward V illegitimate, leaving him and his brother disqualified from inheriting the throne. It's a neat trick, isn't it? With the young princes declared illegitimate, the path is suddenly clear for Richard to claim the throne. And in July 1483, Richard is crowned king. But this is where things get dark, and I mean literally dark, as the young princes disappear from sight within the tower. The last confirmed sighting of the princes was later that summer. Rumors begin to swirl, whispers that the boys had met a tragic end, perhaps even at the hands of their dear Uncle Richard. For centuries, Richard III has been accused of orchestrating their murder to secure his hold on the throne. After all, dead princes don't tend to rise up and reclaim their birthright. The story goes that Richard, desperate to eliminate any threats to his kingship, ordered the two boys killed, possibly by smothering them in their sleep. It's a chilling accusation, one that would cast Richard in the role of a truly ruthless figure, willing to do anything to hold on to power. But before we convict Richard in the court of public opinion, let's consider some alternative theories. One key point is that these accusations didn't really take root until after Richard's death at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, when the Tudors took the throne. Henry VII, the first Tudor king, had every reason to paint Richard as a monster. After all, if you're a new king looking to legitimize your rule, portraying your predecessor as a tyrant and child murderer is quite the narrative advantage. And who do we have to thank for much of Richard's grim reputation? Enter Thomas More and William Shakespeare. More's account, written years after the events, describes Richard as a hunchbacked villain, consumed by ambition and willing to commit any atrocity for power. Shakespeare, ever the dramatist, builds on this image in his play Richard III, giving us one of literature's most infamous villains. Now, it's worth noting that both More and Shakespeare were writing under Tudor rule. And the Tudors have vested interest in making sure Richard was remembered as a murderous usurper rather than, say, a tragic figure caught in a political web. Could Richard's reputation be, at least in part, a product of Tudor spin? But back to the question of what actually happened to the princes. If Richard didn't order their deaths, then who did? Some historians suggest other possible culprits, including Henry Stafford, Duke of Buckingham, a close ally of Richard, who may have had his own ambitions. Stafford's motives remain unclear, but it's possible he saw the princes as a threat to Richard's rule and perhaps to his own influence at court. Another theory posits that Henry VII himself might have had a hand in their disappearance after taking the throne. By then, Henry would have had ample motive to ensure that the princes never returned to challenge his claim. It's worth noting that there's no concrete evidence to confirm that Richard killed his nephews, or, for that matter, that anyone else did. The princes simply vanished, leaving a gap in history that's been filled by centuries of speculation and, shall we say, creative storytelling. Some historians argue that Richard had nothing to gain from killing the boys once he was crowned. But then his position was relatively secure, and eliminating the princes might have created more problems than it solved, especially with public opinion hanging in the balance. Richard may have been ambitious, but was he really willing to tarnish his legacy and risk public outrage by murdering children? Without hard evidence, the truth of what happened to the princes remains elusive. I'm sorry. They may have been murdered, or they may have been quietly moved or hidden away. To this day, the mystery of the princes in the tower lingers as one of history's greatest unsolved cases. Of course, that hasn't stopped countless books, films, and TV shows from speculating about Richard's guilt. The tale of the evil uncle has become a fixture in popular culture, but whether it reflects the truth or merely a compelling story is something we may never fully know. In recent years, some historians have revisited Richard's legacy, suggesting he may have been a more complex and even misunderstood figure. He implemented legal reforms, worked to support the poor, and was genuinely respected in the north of England, where he governed before becoming king. Maybe, just maybe, Richard III wasn't the black-hearted villain he's often made out to be. Or perhaps he was as ruthless as they come, but also a product of his time, a time when the stakes were high and betrayal was often a family affair. One thing's for sure, Richard's story and the mystery of the princes continues to capture our imaginations, casting a shadow that's persisted for over 5 centuries. So thank you for joining us on Outside View Scandals, where we delve into history's most dramatic and controversial stories. And if you want to see another video, the next one is right here in the end screen.